Right. So now we are going to talk about barriers to accessibility. On the slide is an image of icons depicting people of varying ages and abilities, including those who use canes, wheelchairs, um, service dogs, and other mobility devices. And there's one person holding a Nova Scotian flag. Okay, so barriers to accessibility. So accessibility is a human right, and we all have a role to play in identifying and removing barriers. And so accessibility barriers are wide ranging and they can limit individuals through information or communication, technology, attitudes, physical or cultural environments, um, or barriers can be systemic, which means they come through a policy or practice. Um, and barriers are obstacles that make it hard or nearly impossible for disabled people to participate fully in society. Um, Okay, so barriers to accessibility. They're also sometimes not obvious to outside observers, but nonetheless still limit a person's participation within society. And the barriers can look different for different people. Um, so they can be complex and solutions may need to be individualized. Um, and yeah, so barriers here's like a couple categories. So we have physical space slash built environment, information communication, systemic, ableism, attitudinal, and intersectional. So we'll take a deeper dive into each of these in the next couple slides. Okay, so physical space barriers, sometimes called built environment barriers, mean people with disabilities do not have equal access to buildings, streets, sidewalks, washrooms, and other physical spaces. So examples of this could be a lack of ramps, power doors, elevators, or accessible washrooms in a building, and doorknobs that are difficult to operate for people with limited mobility or intense lighting or sound. And for businesses, excluding people with disabilities can mean a loss of profits. In a healthcare setting, physical barriers can increase health risks. So physical space barriers can also be in the outdoors, recreation spaces, and interacting with the natural environment. And so this photo shows an art gallery with support bars, wide doorways, and a barrier-free path of travel. And these are built environment features that can make spaces more accessible. So the information communication barriers. Um, examples of this, so this is when communications are inaccessible. So examples include websites that don't support screen reading software, and or lack of access to sign language, or events or videos that don't offer closed captioning, or ways for participant levels to match the volume levels to their accessibility needs, and documents that are not written in plain language. So on the slide, there is a sign language interpreter at work, and this is an accommodation that can allow for the participation of members of the deaf community. And yeah, so these barriers can be complex, but actively engaging with and listening to those affected is the most important first step. So systemic barriers are policies, practices, or programs that result in people receiving unequal access or opportunities. So examples of this could include income support programs for people with disabilities, um, accessible housing, um, housing policies, educational training programs, health programs, and the way board of directors are set up. And on the slide, this image shows a person using a laptop and they are applying for a grant. However, the application process is inaccessible to someone with low vision, so their chances of success are already lower. What is ableism? So one of the barriers to accessibility that was mentioned earlier in the resource can be in attitudes and underlying belief systems. So an example of this is ableism, and whether intentional or unintentional, ableism is the discrimination against people with disabilities. So similar to racism, sexism, and heteronormativity, ableism classifies an entire group of people as less than, including harmful stereotypes, misconceptions, and generalizations of people with disabilities. So many structures and systems in our society are inherently ableist as they were not designed to be accessible at all. Um, Often ableism is a result of unconscious or implicit bias that represents subconscious ideas and attitudes we hold based on a person's ability or disability. And these ideas may influence our judgment, decisions, and actions, and can ultimately lead to discriminatory behaviors and practices. So, attitudinal barriers. So, this is really like when someone has a preconceived, inaccurate idea about disability, and this could include assuming that a person with a disability cannot understand, or stereotyping people with disabilities. If we hold the inaccurate preconceived belief that people with disabilities will not be able to do certain kinds of work, we might pass over a really qualified candidate with a disability. And so the first photo shows a group of red game pieces separated from one black game piece. And intersectional barriers. So these are barriers faced by persons with disabilities who also experience barriers because of their gender, race, sexual orientation, religion, or other identities. So this is intersectionality is the overlapping of identities that already face discrimination individually. So this means that a person can face a greater number of barriers. For example, the accessibility barriers faced by a male African Nova Scotian who is deaf will be similar, but also different than those experienced by someone who identifies as non-binary, white, and deaf. Um, and so the image shown is here is of overlapping shapes representing, overlapping translucent shapes of different colors, layered upon each other to represent the layering of people's identities. Yeah. And it's really important to consider intersectionality when thinking about barriers and build it into all equity, diversity, and inclusion work. It is way better to understand how persons with disabilities experience multiple forms of marginalization and how they interact with each other. All right, thank you very much. And on the screen is an image of a hand holding a lens, looking at a blurred landscape with a mountain and a lake.